Well, hello, Star Wars fans. I wanted to put a video out tonight. I know it's been some time since I posted a video to my own page, and I appreciate all of you who have subscribed, all of you who follow my page, and who share this with others. So if you feel inclined to do so, please like, subscribe, share, and let folks know that we're out here. I generally follow the Gray Order precepts, try to look at Star Wars from an even keel, both positive and what can be improved upon. And from that perspective, I wanted to talk this evening about the fandom as a whole. I've been watching the Clone Wars. We just did a full rewatch of seasons 1 through 6 with reimagining Star Wars and the Magic Maker on his channel. And through watching that, the series seems every now and then to be a little bit meta. And this is a term that I had learned is when you're kind of self-referencing. And I wanted to bring up 4 characters that I think represent the fandom or different elements of the fandom, and just challenge folks to take a look at how you follow Star Wars, how you support Star Wars, and the things that you watch, the things you subscribe to, the things you support, because it does influence others. And I've talked about that on other videos, but tonight I wanted to just focus on these 4 characters and show you sort of what I've seen as it relates to the meta that's within the Clone Wars itself. So the first character I'll bring up is Sergeant Slick, and he's featured in Season 1, Episode 16, Hidden Enemy. And this is when this ties real close into the movie, the Clone Wars movie that came out. And Sergeant Slick is undermining the Republic by sharing secrets to the enemy. And the reason he does this is because he sees clone service as slavery. And when you watch that episode, again, it's Season 1, Episode 16, Hidden Enemy. When you watch that episode, you see that Sergeant Slick complains that he wants freedom. And he wants freedom for his brothers. This is a guy who takes issue with being forced into military service and into combat. And he sees the best way to get freedom for his brothers, for the clones, is to undermine who he calls the slavers. And if you remember, there's a quote back from George Lucas talking about the slavers when it regards his franchise, and folks have attached that to Disney. And Disney is often seen by a big group of fans as the slavers. And they tie this back to George Lucas's quote. And I think even in context, Lucas talked about selling the franchise to the slavers. And then that kind of bit him, and he kind of pulled it back a little bit. But that's the context of it. And so Sergeant Slick sees the Republic as the slavers, the people who are forcing them into service. And where the show is meta is in that context, that people see Disney as the slavers, tied that back to Lucas, as I mentioned. And the best way that he thought he could do it is by undermining them. And we see fans, Star Wars fans, take this kind of approach. They see Disney as the slavers, and the best way to free the fandom and to free the franchise is by undermining it. And they seek to destroy it. They seek to pull it down so far that maybe Disney would sell it off and it could restart under a different ownership. Maybe Lucas would buy it back himself, or maybe some super fan or a group of fandom. Somebody would buy Lucasfilm and treat it with the respect that they want, and that they would get the freedom from Disney that they feel that they're shackled under. So the first example that I've seen is this Meta, this Sergeant Slick, who wants to free his brothers by tearing down the slavers. The second example I'll give, and I'll come back to Sergeant Slick in a little bit, but the second example comes from season 2, episode 10, The Deserter. And the clone trooper here is Lawquane. And Lawquane left the clones, or the Republic, after seeing too much death and too much destruction. After one of the battles, he just came to a different perspective and decided that he couldn't do it anymore. And he just stepped away. He stepped away to live a life of peace and happiness. He married, or found a wife, had children, and was living peacefully on his own, outside of the Republic, outside of the war, and just doing, living his life happily with his family until the war came to him. When the war came to him, then he fought with Rex and the clone army, the clone troopers that were there, and fought off the attackers. But then he decided to stay with his family, and Rex helps kind of pretend that he doesn't know that Lawquane is there, and off he goes. So the deserter, Lawquane, isn't discovered. And the meta here is that we have Star Wars fans who are so frustrated with the state of things that they've just left. They said, I've had enough. I don't like what's going on. And there's various reasons. There's lots of nuance here. I don't mean to group everybody in one bucket alone. It's just to use these as examples, and we'll come back to them again, and I'll put it more in context. But we do have fans who have left for one reason or another because they're dissatisfied or frustrated with something involved with the franchise, either the movies, the stories, the fandom itself, the bickering, the fighting, whatever it might be. These fans have just said, I've had enough, and they've walked away. They realize there's something better for them in life than arguing and fighting about the state of things within Star Wars. So Lawquane is the second example. The third example comes from season 4. There's a series on the Krell. It's a 4-part arc. In that episode, or in that 4-part story, there's a character in there named Dogma. And Dogma, he accepts whatever Krell tells him to do. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, he obeys orders and goes along with whatever he's told to do. He doesn't question anything, and he's even willing to kill his fellow clones, like at they've got him lined up like to be assassinated or killed. They executed. He's willing to put them on a firing line and kill them under orders for their arguing and fighting back against Krell, who was undermining the Republic after all. So if you're familiar with the story, Krell was a Jedi Knight who, much the way that Dooku was, thought that he could turn, and he was actively taking down the Republic rather than fighting it. So Dogma followed Krell, didn't question his orders, and took orders at face value. And the meta here, the Star Wars fans that kind of align with Dogma, are those that attack anyone who even questions anything about Star Wars. So there are fans who are dissatisfied with one thing or another. I've mentioned that before. They're unhappy about a movie, they're unhappy about a story, a character, or something involved with the franchise. And if anybody mentions any kind of dissatisfaction, some of these fans are like Dogma. They attack anyone who questions. If you don't like a character, if you think that a story could have been written better, you have some criticism, then they'll attack, and they start name calling those who are critical. So Dogma is the third example. The fourth example, and I almost went further, but I decided to just tie it up into four. The fourth example would be, of course, Rex. Rex, he fights alongside the Jedi. He fights for the Republic. He has a strong moral compass. He's smart. He's willing to disobey when needed, but not in a way that hurts the Republic or the Jedi. Not in a way that undermines the Republic's victories. But he does question sometimes, and he does disobey sometimes. And these the meta here are Star Wars fans who are willing to see flaws. They're willing to take issue with certain aspects, but they never fight against, right? They're never trying to actively destroy or tear down any aspect of the franchise in doing it. They fight for the better. So they may see a flaw. They may see something that doesn't quite make sense, but they actively work to reconcile those things and to move things forward for victory. So again, this is my own spin on it, and this is my own interpretation, but I thought I'd bring up these four examples just because I see the meta in the fandom, and there are different reasons that people fall into these categories, and some people may ebb and flow between them. And of course, everybody's going to say, well, I'm part of the Rex fandom, right? I follow more closely the Rex. I criticize, but that's just to make things better. And I would challenge that if the message is always negative, if you're constantly saying that here's the flaw and here's what they did wrong and here's the bad storytelling, here's the reasons this character is bad, here's the reasons, like if every message that you hear from a content creator or from somebody who is a fan, and I'm very careful here not to say that they pretend to be a fan or that they act like a fan. They're actual fans. They are people who love this franchise, and they are doing what they see is best to improve it. And whether they're a Sergeant Slick who think that things have to be destroyed, they have to be torn down to the roots so that Disney will let them go, and that somebody else will take charge. And this shows up from people who want to see Kathleen Kennedy fired. They want to see Disney release it. They want to see George Lucas put back in place. They want to see the ownership change. They want to see the leadership change. They want to see a top-down, complete replacement of the leadership. And many of them see some aspects that they would support, like maybe they want Dave Filoni elevated, or they would like to see some other executive promoted. But ultimately, what they are doing by boycotting or by tearing down, many of these people, you'll even see where somebody might be positive about Star Wars. They're a fan of Star Wars, but then after listening to these Sergeant Slicks, they turn against it as well. And what they're trying to do is just lead more and more people away from supporting, from enjoying the movies or enjoying the characters or enjoying the stories, so that they can tear it down. They want it to be not profitable. They want to do everything they can to subvert the franchise from them making any money whatsoever. So these folks won't buy movie tickets. They won't subscribe to Disney Plus. They won't purchase any of the merchandise that would profit Disney. These are the characteristics. These are the kind of actions that these people take, and their reasoning here is the same as Sergeant Slick's. They want to be free of the slavers. They want to free their brothers and sisters, and they want to make the galaxy better. But I would say there's a better way to do it than the Sergeant Slick, right? And then, ultimately, Sergeant Slick is found. He's found out. And they see him as what he is, right? A hidden enemy. That's the reason that episode is called that. The second one, again, just to revisit, Lawquane, he was the ones that just have had enough. And I've seen this firsthand from people who just say, I can't take that Star Wars fandom. There's too much fighting. They're just nasty people. So don't be that, right? Don't be nasty. But these people just want happiness in their lives. And I can understand that. I can understand saying, I don't need to be a part of that. And when a movie comes along or a show comes along, they'll support it, but they're not actively fighting anymore. So when The Rise of Skywalker come out, they'll go watch it, but they probably won't buy the DVD. When Disney Plus comes out, they'll subscribe, but not just for Star Wars. They'll watch The Mandalorian, or they'll watch the Clone Wars season 7 or whatever might come, but it's not an occupation of their lives anymore. It's only when those things come in contact with them that they support it, and then they resume normal activities. So these are no longer fans, like super fans. They're still, supporting the franchise. They still enjoy Star Wars, but they're just not going to be active in that community any longer. The third one, the Dogma, a lot of people feel attacked by people when they criticize. They say, well, I've been called a chauvinist, or I've been called a bigot, or I've been called some sort of name because they don't like one aspect or another. They get grouped in or lumped in with the bad, and all of a sudden they find themselves on the firing line, somebody getting ready, aim, fire, take them down, and they feel attacked, and in many ways rightfully so. And I've seen that from folks that I've associated with, and that's not the way to be either. So if you are a supporter of Star Wars and you love the franchise and you get angry whenever somebody criticizes something you love, try to understand, try to be supportive, and let them live. Let them carry on, and look for maybe the truth in their message. Dogma, the truth was right before him, but he denied it because of his obedience, right? His just loyalty to the Republic. Don't be Dogma from that perspective. And then the last, of course, is Rex. And this is who everybody wants to be. I think everybody says, well, they want to be that hero. They want to be the icon, the iconic hero, the iconic trooper that saves the day, who's a war hero, who's a leader. I would encourage, yes, try to be a leader. But you know what Rex did? Rex fought for victory, right? He fought alongside of the Jedi. He fought for the Republic. He fought for the franchise. He was not acting in a way like Slick or Dogma. He wasn't acting in a way like many of the Star Wars fans who are just constantly negative. And he also wasn't blind like Dogma. He would disobey when he had to, but he was always fighting for the good. And I wanted to bring up a couple other characters, but I hesitated only because I thought, well, if we do that, then it kind of muddies it. But I'll bring them up here just in closing. That through the Clone Wars, Ahsoka is one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and to some degree, Ahsoka is a model of this as well. Like, she was attacked by the Jedi Order. She was, evidence was kind of cropped up against her, and they kicked her out, and then they found out that they were in the wrong and apologized, and she just walked away, but she was still a hero. So that's one side of it. The other side, and I've brought this up before as well, that her friend said something very, very true, but it was an undermining as well. And it was Barriss. Barriss saw the truth that the Jedi had turned to a force, a tool of the Republic. They no longer stood for just the good. And Barriss acted out in a very similar way as Sergeant Slick in trying to undermine and tear down. She's just trying to destroy the Jedi by implicating one of them, and it happened to be Ahsoka, her friend. But she would actually turned against Anakin and against all of the Jedi because of what she saw that they had turned against, and that they were no longer what she had joined. And I think that that's similar to many Star Wars fans as well. They feel like the franchise has left them. They feel like this isn't what it was when I was growing up. This isn't what it meant to me all these years. It's changed in a way that I can no longer support. And they turned, like Barriss did, against it. And they are fighting against it. I see this everywhere on the internet, especially in YouTube forums. I see it in Discord. I see it all over the place where they say, this is no longer the franchise that I support. And so I'll tag that on to the end as well. Barriss is much like Sergeant Slick, a little bit different because she didn't see them as the slavers. She saw them as being disloyal, that they had changed fundamentally. They no longer stood for their core values, and that's what she then turned against. And she wasn't wrong in her assessment, she was wrong in her actions. And I would take the same with the Star Wars fans that act that way. They're not necessarily wrong in their assessment, and because for everybody, we all come to Star Wars for a different reason. We come to a franchise for a different history. We come at it from a different place, and it means a different thing to us. So while I grew up with Star Wars, I saw the original movie in 1977 when I was just a boy, and I've supported it ever since. Many people may call me a dogma, but I can admit that there are parts of the movies I don't like, or that I wish were different, but I'm not trying to tear it down. I will try to find ways to reconcile it. And I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of the prequels, but even with the prequels, I try to find ways to enjoy it, not ways to keep picking it apart and to drive a bigger wedge in there. So I would encourage you, if you are following channels that meet one of these other characters, they're a Slick or a Lawquane or a Dogma, or maybe they're a Barriss, right? I would encourage you to think about that kind of support. Is that the right place to encourage? Is that the right place to continue to support? And look for content creators, look for fans who are looking for ways to improve it without tearing it down. And I was a supporter for a very long time of Thor Skywalker, and I've tried to avoid bringing specific names in, but I supported Thor, subscribed to his channel, I was a Patreon supporter, donated money. I increased my donation to him at one point, and I was considering increasing again to another tier of support. But over time, I came to understand that Thor Skywalker was not acting in a way like Rex. He was pointing out differences, and I think that Thor Skywalker is well-intentioned. He has the right thoughts. He's a fan. He loves Star Wars, and he has a perspective that a lot of people uh, can identify with. And he's even keeled. He doesn't try to tear down anybody who disagrees with him, but he is constantly pecking, and he takes small things and continues to focus on them to enlarge them, rather than trying to find a way to reconcile it, unheal it, and bridge the gap. He seems to be driving that wedge in deeper and deeper, and you can see this in his videos if you watch over time. And it just became to a point to me that it was apparent that he was no longer interested in trying to reconcile. He was only interested in taking advantage of those flaws and augmenting them, making them bigger, and finding a small thread and pulling it until it became a big hole. I don't see him putting much effort into saying, oh, here's a hole. Let me see if we can stitch it together. Let's see if we can find a way to reconcile it. Let's try to pull it together and bring people together. It's perfectly fine to point out those holes. It's perfectly fine to criticize, right? I'm not throwing stones. I'm saying he's a very important voice, and a lot of people identify with him. He's a very, very strong fan of Star Wars, but he's no longer somebody I can support personally. Um, I have turned more towards people who maybe say, you know what, I didn't like this, but if you did, great for you. And they'll talk about why they didn't like it, but ultimately they're still fans, and they're more positive outlook. They're, to me, come across more like a Rex. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe sometimes they fall into one of these other categories, like a Barriss, but they eventually turn around and they talk about the things they love. They talk about the things that they enjoy. And I've seen that in Star Wars Explained. I've seen that in Star Wars Theory. I've seen that in Hello Greedo. I've seen that in the Den of Nerds. Josh is somebody who I have supported and who I am now, I've been a Patreon supporter of his for a very long time, and continue to support him, and I look for ways to increase that support. And the other that I support on Patreon is Girls with Sabers. I don't agree with them on a lot of their points. I'm not a Raylo at all. But they have a love and an enthusiasm and enjoyment of Star Wars that's infectious. And so I would just encourage you to look for those types. You certainly don't need to follow the people I follow or support them because I do. I'm just trying to encourage you to look for people who are building up, people who are fighting the good fight, who are engaged in the war, who are sometimes critical. Maybe they don't follow dogmatically, right? Like Dogma, but they're still fighting for the franchise, and they bring people in, and they look for victories. They don't try to look for defeats. So that's what the message I wanted to share with you all tonight. I've kind of rambled on. I hope that you've able to follow my reasoning here. And if you have any thoughts, I would love to see some of your thoughts. I would love to engage with you in discussion. And I can be reached in the comments here. You can find me in Discord. I'm a member of Reimagining Star Wars Discord. I'm a member of the Den of Nerds Discord. I'm in the Hello Greedo Discord in Star Wars Explained Discord. So you can find Star Wars Santa in all those places. I'd be happy to engage with you and have some discussion. So hopefully I'll be able to put some more videos out soon, but I'm looking forward to seeing the Clone Wars again tomorrow and as the season unfolds. Until then, may you all have a happy time with your family. May you all be healthy. I hope that everybody's staying safe and that you're enjoying some time with those who you love, and that you find enjoyment in Star Wars. You find enjoyment in whatever your passion is, and I look forward to talking to you later. May the Force be with you, and Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.